Hello, my dear ones. This is your girl, Empress Goddess, the Georgia Peach. Welcome to Empress Goddess Presents Alan Watts.
The source of all light is in the eye. If there were no eyes in this world, the sun would not be light. You evoke light out of the universe. In the same way, you, by virtue of having a soft skin, evoke hardness out of wood. Wood is only hard in relation to a soft skin. It's your eardrum that evokes noise out of the air. You, by being this organism, call into being the whole universe of light and color and hardness and heaviness and everything, you see? But in the mythology that we've sold ourselves on during the end of the 19th century, when people discovered how big the universe was, and that we live on a little planet in a solar system on the edge of a galaxy, which is a minor galaxy, everybody thought, we're really unimportant after all. God isn't there and doesn't love us, and nature doesn't give a damn. And we put ourselves down, see? But actually, it's this little funny microbe, tiny thing, crawling on this little planet, that's way out somewhere, who has the ingenuity, by nature of this magnificent organic structure, to evoke the whole universe out of what would otherwise be mere quanta. There's jazz going on. But you see, this little ingenious organism is not merely some stranger in this. This little organism on this little planet is what the whole show is growing there, and so realizing its own presence. The moment you see, you hypothesize that you are different from the universe, you want to get one up on it. But if you try to get one up on the universe and you're in competition with it, it means you don't understand you are it. You think there's a real difference between self and other. But self, what you call yourself and what you call other, are mutually necessary to each other, like back and front. They're really one. But just as a magnet polarizes itself in north and south, but it's all one magnet, so experience polarizes itself as self and other, but it's all one. So if you try to make the North Pole get the mastery of it, or the South Pole get the mastery of the North Pole, you show you don't know what's going on. So if a person believes that the earth is flat, you can't talk him out of that. He knows it's flat. Look out of the window and see it. Obviously it looks flat. So the only way to convince him that it isn't is to say, well, let's go and find the edge. And in order to find the edge, you've got to be very careful not to walk in circles, or you'll never find it that way. So we've got to go consistently in a straight line, due west, along the same line of latitude. And eventually, when we get back to where we started from, you've convinced the guy that the earth is round. But that's the only way that'll teach him. Because people can't be talked out of illusions. What I think, awakening really involves is a re-examination of our common sense. We've got all sorts of ideas built into us, which seem unquestioned, obvious. And our speech reflects them. The commonest phrases. Face the facts, as if life was something you simply encountered as a foreigner. Face the facts. Our common sense has been rigged so that we feel strangers and aliens in this world. And this is terribly plausible. Simply because it's what we're used to. That's the only reason. But when you really start questioning this, say, is that the way I have to assume life is? I know everybody does, but does that make it true? It doesn't necessarily. It ain't necessarily so. And so then as you question this basic assumption that underlies our culture, you find you get a new kind of common sense. It becomes absolutely obvious to you that you are continuous with the universe. For example, people used to believe that the people who lived in the Antipodes would fall off. And that was scary. But then when somebody sailed around the world, and we all got used to it, and now we travel around in jet planes and everything, we have no problem about feeling that the Earth is globular. None whatever. We got used to it. So in the same way, Einstein's relativity theories, the curvature of the propagation of light, that began to bother people when Einstein started talking like that. But now we're all used to it. Well, in a few years, it will be a matter of common sense to very many people that they're one with the universe. It'll be so simple. And then maybe, if that happens, we shall be in a position to handle our technology with more sense. With love instead of with hate for our environment.
What it do, Prophet? Okay, let me drop that link for you.
It happens in the words of the Taoists, Ziran, which means of itself so. That's their Chinese expression for nature. What happens by itself, what isn't pushed, but it just pops up, you see? Like, I'll never forget, there was a great Zen master I knew once in New York. He was giving a lecture one evening, and he was dressed in his gold ceremonial robes, and he was sitting in front of an altar like this sort of thing, but he had a table in front of him with very formal, with candles on it, and a sutra scripture on a little desk, and he was lecturing on the sutra. And he said,
that link in the chat.
Fundamental principle in Buddhism is no purpose. Purposelessness. When you drop fart, you don't say, at 9 o'clock I drop fart. It happened of itself. You know, and all these pious Western devotees, you know, kind of put their handkerchiefs to their mouths and try not to laugh. So, but that's the meaning of something that happens of itself, like drop fart or have hiccup.
You heard me, Prophet. You know I'll be moving around here in the house, so you better come on up so I can go ahead and add you to the stream.
Or just you came into being, you know. It happens in a kind of a plop way like that. See? Now, you can't tell that process. You ought to happen. You must happen. Because that puts a bind on it. In the same way as when you have a little child and all the relatives have come to a party on Thanksgiving, and you put the child into the middle of all the relatives and say, now, dear, play. See, it absolutely bugs the child to do it like that. And so this is the problem for every artist. Because an artist is a man who makes his living by playing, whether he's dancing or painting or playing music or whatever it is. And he has to overcome this problem. He has to know how to play in public at a given time on an appointment. See? Now that's not an easy thing to learn. But when you catch on to the trick of it, you can do it. To play on demand. That's the hardest lesson of life. To contrive what is called by my Japanese artist friend Saburo Hasegawa a controlled accident. The thing is that we have been educated to use our minds in a certain way, a way that ignores or screens out the fact that every one of us is an aperture through which the whole cosmos looks out. You see, it's as if you had a light covered with a black ball, and in this ball were pinholes, and each pinhole is an aperture through which the light comes out. So in that way, every one of us is actually a pinhole through which the fundamental light.
I'm here by myself today, so I'm moving around a little bit. What's going on, Prophet?
The game we're playing is,
I hope you're well, love.
Nervous.
Peace and blessings to you.
Only that little hole, which we call me, my ego, my specific John Jones, or whatever. If, however, you see, we can maintain at the same time the sense of being this specific John Jones with his role in life, or whatever, and know also underneath this that we are the whole works, you get a very marvelous and agreeable arrangement. This is a most remarkable harmoniousness. I mean, it gives one's life a great sense of joy and exuberance if you can carry on these two things at once. If you, in other words, you know that all the serious predicaments of life are a game. Now, I want to put it two ways. I'm not saying that it's a bad thing, something to be condemned, to take your own individual life seriously, in dead earnest, and to have all the problems that go with that. Do you understand that being that way, that being a real mixed up human being, is a manifestation of nature that is something just like the patterns on the waves out here, or like a seashell. You know, we pick up shells. I always keep one around, sort of an example for many things, and say, my goodness, isn't that gorgeous? There's not an aesthetic fault in it anywhere. It's absolutely perfect. Now, I wonder if these fish look at each other's shells and say, don't you think she's kind of fat? Oh my, those markings aren't really very well spaced. Because that's what we do. See, we don't realize that all of us in our various goings on and behavior and so on are just as much and more marvelous, much more complicated, much more interesting. All these gorgeous faces that I'm looking at, you know, every one of them, some are supposedly pretty, some are supposedly not so pretty, but they're all absolutely gorgeous. And everybody's eyes is a piece of jewelry beyond compare. Beautiful. If you were the Supreme Self, what would you do? I mean, would you just sit there and be blissfully one and everything forever and ever and ever? No, obviously not. You would play games. You would, in other words, for the very nature of the fact that I said, no energy system is an energy system unless it lets go of itself. So you would let go of yourself. And you would get lost. You get involved in all sorts of adventures. And you would forget who you were. Just as when you play a game, playing poker. And although you're only playing for dimes or for chips, you get absorbed in the game. And nothing really important to win, nothing really important to lose, and yet it becomes fantastically interesting who wins and who loses. So in the same way it is said that the Supreme Self gets absorbed through ever so many different channels, which we call all the different beings, in the plot, just like an artist or a writer gets completely absorbed in the artistic creation that he's doing, or an actor gets absorbed in the part in the drama. At first we know it's a drama. We go to a play and we say it's only a play, and the proscenium arch tells us that what happens behind that arch is not for real, just a show. But the great actor is going to make you forget it's just a show. He's going to have you sitting on the edge of your chair. He's going to have you crying. He's going to have you trembling, because he almost persuades you that it's real. What would happen if the very best actor was confronted by the very best audience? Why, they'd be taken in completely, and the one would confirm the other. So this is the idea of the universe as drama. That the fundamental self, the Saguna, Brahman, plays this game, gets involved in being all of us, and does it so damn well, it's so superbly acted that the thing appears to be real. We're not only sitting on the edge of our chair, but we start to get up and throw things. We join in the drama, and it all becomes whatever it is that's going on. See? Then, of course, at the end of the drama, because all things have to have an end, that's at the beginning, the curtain goes down and the actors retire to the green room. And there, the villain and the hero cease to be villain and hero, and they're just the actor. And then they come out in front of the curtain, and they stand in a row, and the audience applauds the villain along with the hero. The villain for having been a good villain, the hero for having been a great hero. The play is over. And everybody heaves a sigh of relief. Well, that was a great show, wasn't it? All this world is a big act. Lila, the play of the Supreme Self. It's therefore compared to a dream, to a passing illusion. And you should not therefore take it serious. Although that, of course, is involved. We do take it seriously. But you see, one of the great questions that you have to ask yourself, when you really get down to the nitty-gritty about your own inmost core, is, are you serious? Or do you know deep within you that you're a put-up?
This is the very devil for teachers.
Because you see, all our universities and schools are trying to teach creativity. That's a great thing these days, you know. And you hear the Esalen, all sorts of people are giving courses and workshops in creativity. Now, the trouble is this. If we found out a method whereby we could teach creativity, and everybody could just explain how it was done, it would no longer be of interest. What always is an essential element in the creative is the mysterious. There's a poem which says that when the bird calls, the mountain becomes more mysterious. You imagine, for example, you're in a mountain valley and everything is very silent. And suddenly a crow squawks somewhere. You don't know where that crow is, and that little sound emphasizes the silence. Silence becomes deeper and deeper. Well, this word is used for the kind of mysteriousness which that bird's call creates. The expression yugen. And yugen is a quality which the poet Soami, who was a great artist of the No plays, said, yugen is to watch wild geese flying and be hidden in a cloud, to watch ships sailing in the distance and to disappear behind a far-off island, to wander on and on in a great forest without thought of return. Now, all those things have in them, you see, an element of mystery. There's a Chinese poem which puts it this way. It is a poem written by a man who has gone to find a sage in the mountains. And the sage has a little hut at the foot of the mountain and a boy there who is his servant. I asked the boy beneath the pines. He said, the master's gone alone, herb gathering somewhere on the mount, cloud hidden, whereabouts unknown. And this also creates the mood of yugen. That's this funny idea of the deep and the dark, the thing that is important just because you can't quite understand it. Now, to Westerners, all that tends to sound rather hopeless. To say, if you can't tell us how it's done, what's the use? And that, you see, is because we have insufficient trust in ourselves.
Yeah, see, I know you heard, I always talk about my parents. You know, I tell everybody, you know, that I was a doctor when I was 2. You know, my experience when I had to go within and do my shadow work, I had to kind of work through those issues too, those abandonment issues. Because my parents, they had 2 biological children and they adopted 5 of us. I was the baby. But all of us knew who our birth parents were, our biological parents were. And I had to come to the realization that, you know, I was really blessed because, you know, my mom, she did what she thought she was right for me. She was 16 when she had me. At least she gave me to some of the best parents anybody could have had. She didn't, you know, she didn't abort me. She didn't, you know, back then in the 70s, you know, those women were throwing kids in the trash cans, having them, you know, all kind of stuff. But she had enough love for me to do what was best for me. So I had to come to the realization that it was done out of love. So that was her call. Her birthday was yesterday, so I was talking to her. But anyway, I'm gonna do a little mopping and stuff. I'm listening.
We'll never be able to do certain things unless we have instructions as to how to do it. This comes, of course, partly from our toilet training. Mama gets anxious that it won't happen and starts making commandments about it. And then you have to have courses. And one of the funniest stories I heard was somebody was in a hotel in Europe, in England somewhere, and was going downstairs, and suddenly there was a room, you know, where they have committee meeting rooms, and there were a whole chorus of people saying, "We haven't today, but we will tomorrow. We haven't today, but we will tomorrow." I said, "What on earth is that?" Oh, somebody said, "That is Dr. Coué's constipation class."
I don't know if that's my speaker or what.
The Taoist idea is not like that, you see. It will, trust in yourself, because
I'm going to change speakers whole time.
Fulfills these things spontaneously.
It must have been on their end. Okay.
The whole conception of nature
Oh, there you go again.
Is as a self-regulating, self-governing, indeed democratic organism. But it has a totality. It all goes together, and this totality is the Tao. When we speak in Taoism of following the course of nature, following the way, what it means is more like this. Doing things in accordance with the grain.
I might be on about wore that. Yeah, give me a second, babe. Don't forget. Don't kill. Okay.
The Tao. When we speak in Taoism,
no, it got to be on their end
because
I just changed speakers. I still hear that little noise in the background.
What it means is more like this. Doing things in accordance with the grain. It doesn't mean you don't cut wood, but it means that you cut. The source of all light is in the eye.
Okay, there you go.
I remember once I was looking in the open air, and one of those glorious little
Can you hear it good, Prophet?
Things came, and I picked it up like that and brought it down, and it looked as if it was struggling to get away.
Can you hear it good?
Just as if you caught an insect by one leg, like a very long leg or something of that kind. It seemed to be struggling to get away, and at first I thought, well, it's not doing that. That's just the wind blowing. Then I thought again, really? Only the wind blowing? Surely it is the structure of this thing which, in cooperation with the existence of wind, enables it to move like an animal, but using the wind's effort, not its own. It is more intelligent being than an insect, in a way, because an insect uses effort, like a person who rows a boat uses effort, but the man who puts up a sail is using magic. He lets nature do it for him with the intelligence to use a sail. See? So in just this way, there's the meaning of the is that kind of intelligence which, without your using very much effort, gets everything to cooperate with you. Now that is the most highly skillful art of all. That is Taoism in perfection. You,
when
for
you're home
example,
alone, you can just
never force other people
like
to
you
agree
can do
with
more when
you,
you're home alone.
but you give them the notion that the idea you wanted them to have was their own. This is a feminine art, preeminently. A woman who really wants a lover does not pursue him, because then most men feel that she's aggressive. And if she's aggressive, she obviously is a woman who has had difficulty in finding lovers. Therefore, there must be some undesirably secret thing about her.
Wow.
But if she, as it were, makes a void, then, and they're slightly difficult to get, then people get excited. They know she's a highly prized object, and so they pursue. Same way, when you want to teach a baby to swim, the thing you can do is to put the baby in the water, and then move backwards in the water and create a vacuum. And this pulls the baby along. It helps it to learn the feel of the water and how to swim. It's the same principle. In just the same way, for example, you don't have to attend, unless you're sick, to the government of your own body. It happens automatically.
Don't never fail.
Lao Tzu puts it in this way: the great Tao flows everywhere, both to the left and to the right. It loves and nourishes all things, but does not lord it over them.
It don't never fail. Seems like when I be playing that flyer, something gonna always make some noise. Now they cutting the lawn and shit out there.
And when merits are accomplished, it lays no claim to them. The more, therefore, you relinquish power, trust others, the more powerful you become. But in such a way that instead of having to lie awake nights, controlling everything, you do it beautifully by trusting the job to everyone else. And they carry it on for you. This seems a sort of paradox to say this, but the principle of unity, of coming to a sense of oneness with the whole of the rest of the universe, is not to try to obtain power over the rest of the universe. That will only disturb it and antagonize it and make it seem less one with you than ever. The way to become one with the universe is to trust it as another, as you would another, and say, let's see what you're going to do.
That's that law of attraction.
But in doing that, you see, in saying that to everything else that you have been taught to think is not you, you are also saying it to yourself. Because finally, as I pointed out, you do not know where your decisions come from. They pop up like hiccups. And when you make a decision, people have a great deal of anxiety about making decisions. So when we decide, we're always worrying, did I think this over long enough? Did I take enough data into consideration? And if you think it through, you find you never could take enough data into consideration. The data for a decision in any given situation is infinite. So what you do is, you go through the motions of thinking out what you will do about this. And then when the time comes to act, you make a snap judgment. I mean, I'm speaking a little extremely, making some fun of it and so on, because after all, we do occasionally get the vague outlines of things and make a right decision on rational grounds. But we fortunately forget the variables that could have interfered with this coming out right. It's amazing how often it works. But warriors are people who think of all the variables beyond their control and what might happen. So then when you make a decision, and it works out all right, I think very little of it has much to do with your conscious intent and control. The more you let go of it and trust it, as if it were quite other than you, the more you realize the inseparable identity of self and other. If you ever saw, for example, the film Kon-Tiki, this man figured out a few things as to how to make a balsa wood raft to sail from South America to the Pacific Islands. But once he had set this in motion, he discovered that all sorts of unexpected factors cooperated with him. That when the wood got wet, it expanded, so that the ties bit into it and held it completely secure. He'd never expected that. And he found that as he sailed along, a flying fish would simply alight flat on the deck every morning for breakfast. That all kinds of natural factors, it was just, he'd touched a key where he was flowing with the course of nature, and everything cooperated with him. Because he had touched the key, he'd made the act of faith. To be detached from the world, in the sense that Buddhists and Taoists and Hindus will often talk about detachment, does not mean to be non-participative. You can have a sexual life very rich and very full, and yet all the time be detached. By that I don't mean that you just go through it mechanically and have your thoughts elsewhere. I mean a complete participation, but still detached. And the difference of the two attitudes is this. On the one hand, there is a way of being so anxious about physical pleasure.
You know what? No matter how many,
So
because I
afraid
mop every day.
that you won't make
See,
it.
like no matter how many times
you
you
grab
mop,
it too hard.
well, it seems like you still gonna get the most damn dirt.
That you just have to have that thing.
And dust too.
And if you do that, you destroy it completely. And therefore, after every attempt to get it, you feel disappointed. You feel empty, you feel something was lost. And therefore you want it again. You have to keep repeating, because you never really got there. And it's this that is the hang-up. This is what is meant by attachment to this world in an evil sense. But on the other hand, pleasure in its fullness cannot be experienced when one is grasping it. I knew a little girl to whom someone gave a bunny rabbit. She was so delighted with the bunny rabbit and so afraid of losing it that taking it home in the car, she squeezed it to death with love. And lots of parents do that to their children, and lots of spouses do it to each other. They hold on too hard, and so take the life out of this transient, beautifully fragile thing that life is. To have it, to have life, and to have its pleasure, you must at the same time let go of it. And then you can feel perfectly free to have that pleasure in the most gutsy, rollicking, earthy, lip-licking way.
He said lip-licking way.
One's whole being taken over by a kind of undulated, convulsive ripple, which is like the very pulse of life itself. This can happen only if you let go.
Surrender to the universe.
What do you mean happiness? What exactly do you mean by happiness? If you translate a particular sensation as happiness, you call it happiness, a particular sensation that is there. You separate yourself and use that knowledge about the happiness that is put in there and translate that and tell yourself that you are happy. You understand? All sensations are very short-lived. They can't last forever. So the moment you separate yourself from a particular sensation and tell yourself that you are happy, the demand to keep that going longer than its duration of life is inevitable. So what all you are doing to stretch that and keep that going on and on has turned that into the opposite unhappiness. You are stuck with unhappiness. Same is the case with the pleasure. You want to be.
Have you ever watched The Secret Prophet?
It's just not possible. So you are turning pleasure into pain.
You ever watch The Secret?
We are not ready to accept it. And all those religious jokers tell us, we have some ways, we teach you the techniques of meditation, yoga, this, that, and the other, and you will be in a permanent bliss.
I'm going to let you listen to it.
The demand for permanence in every area of our existence is the cause of human misery. There is no such thing as permanence at all.
A year ago, my life had collapsed around me. I'd worked myself into exhaustion. My father died suddenly, and my relationships were in turmoil. Little did I know at the time, out of my greatest despair was to come the greatest gift. I'd been given a glimpse of a great secret. I began tracing the secret back through history. I couldn't believe all the people who knew this. They were the greatest people in history. All I wanted to do was share the secret with the world. I began searching for people alive today who know the secret. One by one, they began to emerge.
You know, this secret gives you everything you want. Happiness, health, and wealth.
You can have, do, or be anything you want. We can have whatever it is that we choose. I don't care how big it is.
What kind of a house do you want to live in?
Do you want to be a millionaire?
What kind of a business do you want to have?
Do you want more success?
What do you really want?
I've seen many miracles take place in people's lives. Financial miracles, miracles of physical healing, mental healing, healing in relationships.
All of this happened because of knowing how to apply the secret.
This is the great secret of life.
You've probably been sitting there wondering, what is the secret? I'll tell you how I have come to understand it. We all work with one infinite power. We all guide ourselves by exactly the same laws. The natural laws of the universe are so precise that we don't even have any difficulty building spaceships. We can send people to the moon, and we can time the landing with the precision of a fraction of a second. I don't care if you're in India, if you're in Australia, New Zealand, Stockholm, or London, or Toronto, or Montreal, or New York. We're all working with one power, one law. It's attraction. The secret is the law of attraction. Everything that's coming into your life, you are attracting into your life. And it's attracted to you by virtue of the images you're holding in your mind. It's what you're thinking. You see, whatever is going on in your mind, you are attracting to you. Now, wise people have always known that. You can go right back to the ancient Babylonians. They've always known this. It's a small, select group of people. Why do you think that 1% of the population earns around 96% of all the money that's being earned? Do you think that's an accident? It's no accident. It's designed that way. They understand something. They understand the secret. And you are being introduced to the secret.
The simplest way for me to look at the law of attraction is if I think of myself as a magnet, and I know that a magnet will attract to it.
Very basically put, the law of attraction says that like attracts like, but we're really talking at a level of thought.
Our job as humans is to hold on to the thoughts of what we want, make it absolute clear in our minds what we want. And from that, we start to invoke one of the greatest laws in the universe, and that's the law of attraction. You become what you think about most, but you also attract what you think about most.
If you see it in here, you're going to hold it here.
And that principle can be summed up in 3 simple words. Thoughts become things.
What most people don't understand is a thought has a frequency. Every thought has a frequency. We can measure a thought. And so if you're thinking that thought over and over and over again, or if you're imagining in your mind, okay, having that brand new car, having the money that you need, building that company, finding your soulmate, if you imagine what that looks like, you're emitting that frequency on a consistent basis.
Thoughts are sending out that magnetic signal that is drawing the parallel back to you.
See yourself living in abundance, and you will attract them. It always works. It works every time with every person.
Here's the problem. Most people are thinking about what they don't want, and they're wondering why it shows up over and over and over again.
The law of attraction doesn't care whether you perceive something to be good or bad, or whether you don't want it or whether you do want it. It's responding to your thoughts. So if you're sitting there looking at a mountain of debt, feeling terrible about it, that's the signal you're putting out to the universe. Wow, I feel really bad because of all this debt I've got. You're just affirming it to yourself. You feel it on every level of your being. That's what you're going to get more of.
The law of attraction is really obedience. When you think of the things that you want and you focus on it with all of your intention, the law of attraction will give you what you want every time. When you focus on the things that you don't want, I don't want to be late, I don't want to be late, you really are calling that into existence. The law of attraction doesn't hear that you don't want it, and so it's going to show up over and over and over again. The law of attraction is not biased to wants or don't want. It manifests the things that you think about.
The law of attraction is always working. Whether you believe it or understand it or not, it's always working.
It's working as much as you're thinking. Anytime your thoughts are flowing, the law of attraction is operational. When you're thinking about the past, present, or the future, the law of attraction is working. It's an ongoing process. You don't press pause, you don't press stop. It is forever in action, as your thoughts are.
Creation is always happening. Every time an individual has a thought or a prolonged, chronic way of thinking, they're in the creation process. Something is going to manifest out of those thoughts.
Law of attraction says we'll give you whatever it is you say and focus on. And so if you're complaining about how bad it is, what you're creating is more of how bad it is.
Oh, look, I got that. I had a student named Robert. Robert was a gay man, and he was taking an online course I have, part of which entails email access to me. And he outlined all of the grim realities of his life. In his job, all the people ganged up on him. And it was constantly stressful because of how nasty they were with him. When he walked down the street, he said every block he was accosted by homophobic people who wanted to abuse him in some way. He was wanting to become a stand-up comedian. And when he went out and did a stand-up comedy job, everybody heckled him about being gay. And his whole life was one of a lot of unhappiness and misery, and it all focused around this idea of being attacked because he was gay. I began to teach him that he was focusing on what he did not want. I directed him back to his email that he sent me and said, read it again. Look at all the things you do not want that you're telling me about. And I can tell you're very passionate about this. When you focus on something with a lot of passion, it makes it happen even faster. And then he really started taking this thing about focusing on what you want to heart. And he began really trying. What happened within the next 6 to 8 weeks was absolutely a miracle. He said that all the people in his office that had been harassing him either transferred to another department, quit working at the company, or started totally leaving him alone, and he began to love his job. He noticed that when he was walking down the street that nobody came up to him and harassed him anymore. They just weren't there.
I am a very, very gay man.
When he went and did his stand-up comedy routines, he started getting standing ovations and nobody was heckling him. His whole life changed because he changed from focusing on what he did not want, what he was afraid of, what he wanted to avoid, to focusing on what he did want.
So we may be very positive in our outlook and orientation. We tend to attract positive people and positive events and circumstances. We may be very negative in our orientation or very angry, in which case we tend to attract negative, angry people and negative, angry circumstances.
And so you end up attracting to you the predominant thoughts that you're holding in your awareness, whether those thoughts are conscious or whether they're unconscious. That's the rub.
If you look very carefully, when it comes to the secret, the power of our mind, the power of our intention in our daily lives, it's all around us. All we got to do is open our eyes and look.
You can see law of attraction everywhere. you draw everything to yourself. The people, the job, the circumstances, the health, the wealth, the debt, the joy, the car that you drive, the community that you're in, and you've drawn them all to you like a magnet. What you think about, you bring about. Your life is a physical manifestation of the thoughts that go on in your head.
I mean, I'm not talking to you from the point of view of just wishful thinking or imaginary craziness. I'm talking to you from a deeper, basic understanding. Quantum physics really begins to point to this discovery. It says that you can't have a universe without mind entering into it. The mind is actually shaping the very thing that is being perceived.
Now, if you don't understand it, doesn't mean you should reject it. You don't understand electricity, probably. First of all, no one even knows what electricity is, and yet you enjoy the benefits of it. Do you know how it works? I don't know how it works, but I do know this, that you can cook a man's dinner with electricity, and you can also cook the man.
People oftentimes, when they begin to understand the great secret, become frightened of all of these negative thoughts that they have. Two things they need to be aware of. One, it has been proven now scientifically that an affirmative thought is hundreds of times more powerful than a negative thought. So that eliminates a degree of worry right there.
And the second thing is that thank God there's a time delay, that all of your thoughts don't come true instantly. We'd be in trouble if they did. The time delay serves you. It allows you to reassess, think about what you want, and make a new choice.
So you want to become aware of your thoughts, you want to choose your thoughts carefully, and you want to have fun with this because you are the masterpiece of your own life. You are the Michelangelo of your own life. The David that you are sculpting is you, and you do it with your thoughts.
The leaders in the past who had the secret wanted to keep the power and not share the power. So they kept people ignorant of the secret. People went to work, they did their job, they came home. They were on a treadmill with no power because the secret was kept in the few.
We live in a universe in which there are laws. Just as there's a law of gravity, if you fall off a building, it doesn't matter whether you're a good person or a bad person, you're gonna hit the ground.
Everything that's around you right now in your life, including the things you're complaining about, you've attracted. Now, I know at first blush, that's going to be something that you hate to hear. You know, you're going to immediately say, I didn't attract the car accident. I didn't attract this particular client. I didn't particularly attract the debt. I didn't attract whatever it happens to be that you're complaining about. And I'm here to be a little bit in your face and to say, yes, you did attract it. And this is one of the hardest concepts to get. But once you've accepted it, it's life transforming. This is part of the overall giant secret here.
And most of us attract by default. We just think that we don't have any control over it. Our thoughts are on autopilot, our feelings are on autopilot, and so everything is just brought to us by default.
Now, if this is your first time to hear this, it may feel like, oh, I have to now monitor my thoughts. This is going to be a lot of work. It will seem like that at first, but that's where the fun begins.
It's impossible to monitor every thought we have. Researchers tell us that we have about 60,000 thoughts a day. Can you imagine how exhausted you feel trying to control all of those thoughts? Fortunately, there's an easier way, and it's our feelings. Our feelings let us know what it is that we're thinking.
So your thoughts cause your feelings.
The emotions are this incredible gift that we have to let us know what we're attracting.
Think about it. You have good feelings and you have bad feelings. And you know the difference between the two because one makes you feel good and the other makes you feel bad. It's the depression, it's the guilt, it's the resentment, the anger. It's those feelings that don't make you feel empowered. Those are bad feelings.
On another level, it's called bad frequency or bad vibes or whatever you want to call it.
The flip side to that is that you have good emotions, good feelings, and you know when they come because they make you feel good. Excitement, joy, gratitude, love. Imagine if we can feel that way every day. When you celebrate the good feelings, you'll draw to you more good feelings and things that make you feel good.
So it's really so simple. It's right there. The answer is, what am I attracting right now? How do you feel? I feel good. Well, good. Keep doing that.
Our feelings are a feedback mechanism to us about whether we're on track or not, whether we're on course or off course.
If you're feeling good, then you're creating a future that's on track with what you're desiring. If you're feeling bad, you're creating a future that's off track with your desires. As you go about your day, the law of attraction is working in every second. Everything we think, everything we're feeling is creating our future. If you're worried, if you're in fear, then that's bringing more of that into your life throughout the day. Whatever you're thinking and feeling today is creating your future.
And you're getting exactly what you're feeling about, not so much what you're thinking about. That's why people, if they stub their toe out of bed, they tend to spiral.
Inquiry into police corruption.
The whole day goes like that, you know. They have no clue that a simple shifting of their emotions can change their entire day and life. If you start out having a good day and you're in that particular happy feeling, as long as you don't allow something to change your mood, you're going to continue to attract, by the law of attraction, more situations, circumstances, people that sustain that happy feeling. Good days, bad days, rich get richer, poor get poorer. It's all about what these people are predominantly and continually feeling.
You can begin right now to feel healthy. You can begin to feel prosperous. You can begin to feel the love that's surrounding you, even if it's not there. And what will happen is the universe will correspond to the nature of your song. The universe will correspond to the nature of that inner feeling and manifest, because that's the way you feel.
Your thoughts and your feelings create your life. It'll always be that way, guaranteed.
So basically what you focus on with thought and feeling is what you attract into your experience, whether or not it's something you want.
It's hard to swallow, but when we can begin to open ourselves up to that, ramifications are awesome. It means that whatever thought has done in your life, it can be undone through a shift in your awareness.
It's really important that you feel good, because this feeling good is what goes out as a signal into the universe and starts to attract more of itself to you. So the more you can feel good, the more you will attract the things that help you feel good and are to keep bringing you up higher and higher.
When you're feeling down, do you know that you can change it like that? Put on a beautiful piece of music. Start singing. That'll change your emotion. Or think of something beautiful. Think of a baby. Maybe one you love. And dwell on it. Really keep that thought in your mind. Block everything out but that thought. I guarantee you'll start to feel good.
This principle applies to your family pet, for instance, which I believe are wonderful because they put you in a great emotional state. When you feel love for your pet, that's a great state of love. It's going to bring goodness into your life. What a gift that is.
Once you begin to understand and truly master your thoughts and feelings, that's when you see how you create your own reality. That's where your freedom is. That's where all your power is. That's when you see how you can become a deliberate creator of your life. And when you are a deliberate creator of your life and you use this law of attraction, you will have a life that is beyond what you can possibly imagine right now.
Since I learned the secret and started applying it to my life has truly become magical. I think the kind of life that everybody dreams of, and I live on a day-to-day basis. I live in a $4.5 million mansion. I have a wife to die for. I get to vacation in all the fabulous spots of the world. I've climbed mountains, I've explored, I've been on safari. And all of this happened and continues to happen because of knowing how to apply the secret.
Life can be absolutely phenomenal, and it should be, and it will be, when you start using the secret.
The Bible said live life and live life more abundantly, didn't it?
To be detached from the world, in the sense that Buddhists and Taoists and Hindus will often talk about detachment, does not mean to be non-participative. You can have a sexual life very rich and very full, and yet all the time be detached. By that I don't mean that you just go through it mechanically and have your thoughts elsewhere. I mean a complete participation, but still detached. And the difference of the two attitudes is this. On the one hand, there is a way of being so anxious about physical pleasure, so afraid that you won't make it, that you grab it too hard, that you just have to have that thing. And if you do that, you destroy it completely. And therefore, after every attempt to get it, you feel disappointed. You feel empty, you feel something was lost. And therefore you want it again. You have to keep repeating, because you never really got there. And it's this that is the hang-up. This is what is meant by attachment to this world, in an evil sense. But on the other hand, pleasure in its fullness cannot be experienced when one is grasping it. I knew a little girl to whom someone gave a bunny rabbit. She was so delighted with the bunny rabbit and so afraid of losing it that taking it home in the car, she squeezed it to death with love. And lots of parents do that to their children, and lots of spouses do it to each other. They hold on too hard, and so take the life out of this transient, beautifully fragile thing that life is. To have it, to have life, and to have its pleasure, you must at the same time let go of it. And then you can feel perfectly free.
The out-of-body experience, as well as clairvoyance and telepathy, show us is that some part of us does extend in a non-physical manner beyond the body, and beyond space and time. The physical brain, these 3 pounds of wet matter inside our skulls, that's the veil. And its job is to keep us grounded in this temporary existence. So it blocks a lot of information out, including that part of ourself that is more than physical.
How do you teach other people to be psychic?
It's really about relaxation and just repetition. And when people are open to it and don't overthink it, they'll succeed. And they still don't understand, like, how did I do that? And that's the tricky part, is we don't know exactly how it happens, just that it does.
Well, welcome to Beyond Belief. Sean McNamara with us began to experience psychic abilities in his 30s, not that old now. And after becoming frustrated with the direction his spiritual life had taken, he decided to do something about it. Sean, welcome to Beyond Belief.
Thanks for having me, George.
How did this happen to you, though? What happened?
Well, there was a personal crisis, is the best way to put it. I grew up as a religious person, and as a younger adult, I pursued other formal religions to find some answers for myself, and it was all based on my fear of death.
Okay.
When I was a kid, I had an appendectomy. I had appendicitis, and I didn't know what it was when the pain started coming on. So there were a few days where I was in excruciating pain, and then my parents took me to the hospital, and that was my first encounter.
I'm trying to find something fire, Prophet.
And they form partnerships because the electrogravitic model of interaction between celestial bodies shows that gravity is long-range repulsive and short-range attractive. Stars being an electrical phenomenon, they continue to shine because the electric current flowing through these clouds is everywhere. There are minor filaments alongside major ones. So the stars then shine according to their environment. In the case of the sun, it doesn't seem to
you don't like that either, huh?
do anything dramatic to continue.
I'm gonna play something. How long I've been on? I've been on over, and now I'm gonna play something else because
How are we
I need to
connected
run
to the
off
same
for a while.
force as the sun?
I'm gonna play one more. Trying to find something good for us to listen to real quick. Trying to eat me something. I guess y'all say I'm always damn eating. Let's see. Come on, what's good on here we can watch?
Never before has it been more important to begin looking into the nature of reality in an ordered way. This is what the various ancient mystical orders were based upon. A clear intellect endowed with the capacity to see deeper truths, even unseen energies. We have Robert Gilbert with us today to speak about the unique virtues of the ancient lineages of knowledge. And you span all of them pretty much.
Math and music are the most common universal languages. The ancient Greek
How you doing,
philosopher
ghetto child, my love?
believed that if we could unravel the connections between math and music, humanity could discover the mysteries of the universe. This harmonic connection takes root in what's known as sacred geometry.
The term sacred geometry means the sacred measure of the earth. But what that was understood to mean in classical traditions is that there is an invisible blueprint from higher worlds that exists behind everything in the physical world. It goes from higher consciousness levels down to the level of energy and vibration, where it becomes a vibrational field, a vibrational matrix, that in ancient traditions was called the net.
The ancient scholars discovered specific geometric shapes that seemed to be interwoven everywhere in the net. 5 of these forms, the Platonic solids, fit perfectly within a sphere.
It's the perfect form because every point on the periphery of the sphere is exactly equidistant from the center.
Y'all know I like sacred geometry.
Plane, the unified field source. And so having that initial container for creation, we can then modify the vibration of that container by then putting particular divisions onto it.
The very first of the Platonic solids is the tetrahedron. Its angular sum is 720 degrees. Interesting as well that 720 degrees is the foundational basis of all greater complexity in all geometric forms. Every geometry, no matter what structure or form, will always have angular sums that will be a multiple of 720 degrees. So we now know that the foundational basis of all higher dimensional solids in geometry will always also be related to the number 9. 7 plus 2 plus 0 equals 9. So then we go beyond the tetrahedron to the next structure, which is the cube. It has an angular sum of 2,160 degrees. 2 plus 1 plus 6 equals 9. The next level will be an octahedron, 1,440 degrees. Again, 9. We go on to the icosahedron, which has 3,600 degrees as its angular sum, showing an interesting relationship to the circle, the feminine. And then we take it to the next level with the dodecahedron, which is giving us 6,480 degrees as its angular sum, because it has 12 sides of 5 sides each. This is a very interesting thing to note, because the icosahedron as well has this unique structure that it's made specifically only of equilateral triangles, and from that we have this 3,600 degree form that also becomes a dual style relationship with the dodecahedron. So the dodecahedron and the icosahedron have this very unique relationship. They're closely tied to each other. You could say one is sort of the subconscious of the other.
It's okay? You can't talk, you're choking now.
The Greeks assigned an element of creation to each of these solids.
Okay.
The 4 that they would speak about publicly in the Greek school were the ones for earth, water, air, and fire. But the 5th element, the 5th Platonic solid, they would not.
But guess what, though? It all circled back around to astrology, Prophet.
About publicly. It was forbidden for people in the school. In fact, they'd have to make an oath that they would prefer to be tortured and killed rather than reveal the secret of the 5th form. And that's the dodecahedron, which is the form that connects to the ether. And that's the dynamic life force that actually allows things to become alive and dynamic, and actually animates the 4 previous elements.
The number 9, which plays such a vital role in the formation of the Platonic solids, has an intriguing connection to music.
No matter what form or structure you go to in higher forms and hypercubes, you will always find the same consistency relational back to the number 9. And all of the notes of the Platonic solids are as follows. 720 degrees, that's an F sharp. 2160 degrees of the Q, that's going to basically be a C sharp. So this is an important aspect to understand, that all of the Platonic solids and all of the polygons are just the same structure and form as what we see in 9-based mathematics, and giving us the exact same notes that we find in the most beautiful chord in all of music, the F sharp major chord.
We can use modern physics to look at frequencies in another way.
If you think of string theory as, strings vibrating at the quantum scale, these vibrating structures would create interference pattern that produce geometric relationships. These geometry are typically portrayed in these different traditions as symbology, right? So all kinds of symbols describing the geometry of space, or the geometry that these vibrations produce as they created organization or organized matter into the space, which we call our reality, as it organized the material world.
Living organisms are all an intricate part of this vibrational ensemble.
Everything in existence is an harmonious sharing of sound frequencies and light. We can see this in rhythms of nature, such as tides, seasons, or in the human with the breathing, heartbeat, brainwave. All systems in time have rhythms. Even time is a rhythm. Some sounds are harmonious and some sounds are discordant, but there are no inherently good or bad frequencies or combinations of notes. In some cases, dissonance might be useful to dislodge stuck discordant patterns from a system. Always the intention behind the frequency or the sound will be the carrier wave of its effect.
One of the simplest of musical instruments demonstrates the implicate harmony of the universe.
The Greek philosopher Pythagoras envisioned that between the polarities of absolute spirit and absolute matter, a single monochord stretched across the spectrum of the universe.
You'll find that the monochord was used in many illustrations from the Pythagorean school of Greece to communicate very deep secrets that they learned from the Egyptian temples. What it demonstrates is that when you hold down the string at a particular point and you pluck the string, you can analyze what is happening as the vibration that comes out of it.
The monochord is basically like the neck of a guitar without the guitar. 2 feet long, and it's got 2 bridges. And it's got this one string monochord with 1 tuning peg. Let's say the string when we pluck it is 400 hertz. If I put my finger exactly at the halfway mark, each of those 2 strings is exactly 1 octave higher. Then if I start to put my finger on 1/3 or 2/3 or 4/5 or 5/6 or any of these fractional values, we have harmonics and overtones. So that's geometry and music right there.
So the monochord is essentially one note that can be divided into an infinite number of notes. The analogy of the monochord is alluded to in many esoteric lineages who speak to the creation of the one, which was then divided into the many, which is all of creation.
There's an even older instrument than the monochord that demonstrates the spectrum of frequency.
The didgeridoo is essentially one note, like the monochord, except it is played with the breath instead of a string. And it's interesting that the word for spirit and the word for breath in many languages except English is the same word. So the didgeridoo is essentially a monochord of the spirit made audible.
Can we see the vibrations of spirit made visible? Thanks to a technology developed over the last century, the answer is yes.
So this very powerful relationship between sound and pattern really was brought into focus when the emerging science of cymatics came into focus.
The sound literally can move and shape matter. It started by Hans Jenny, who was using on a plate, and then he put certain materials on there. Maybe it was water, maybe it was sand, maybe it was clay, some type of material. And then he would pipe a certain frequency across the plate. And what he observed under a microscope was that the sound interacted with the materia, and it started to move it and shape it. And each unique frequency that came across that plate interacted with that matter in a unique way. So it would create like a signature pattern within the materia. Some of the patterns that were formed just by a drop of water on the plate formed these beautiful mandalas. And what he saw was that the higher in frequency, the more complexity that we would find in the mandala.
Because of the particular wavelength of the sound and the resonant frequency of the plate and the material that's on it, all of those acting together create a static appearance of a figure. And that figure can frequently be something that appears in nature, like the hexagonal crystal, or even occasionally like a snowflake, if it's really adapted properly. But it's nothing more than vibration affecting material through resonance.
Sacred geometric patterns also play an amazing role within the human body.
The more you look into the measurements and the figures in the body, in other words, the distance between the eyes and the nose, the distance between the ears and the mouth, and the eyes and the top lip, for example, you start to find all of these different geometrical and mathematical shapes and figures.
It's more than just geometric shapes that make biology a sacred system. There's also a harmonic relationship taking place with the cosmos.
Nature is based upon the replication and duplication of only a very few patterns in rhythms and cycles. One of the most foundational is phi, or the phi ratio. We see this ratio, 1.618, in our body, the ratio from the tip of our finger to the first joint, to the tip of our finger to the second joint, to the tip of our finger to our hand, and from the tip of our hand to our wrist, and our wrist to our elbow.
The human body is a representative of the Great Pyramid, which is also a representative of a scaled down version of the planet itself. So the human body is actually a representation of planet Earth, if you scale it down.
We have 2 arms, 2 legs, we have a head, so we have 5 major appendages. And if we look at that shape of the human spread out, we are the shape of a pentagram. The Vitruvian Man by Leonardo da Vinci is a great depiction of this, where you can see the proportions from the feet to the navel and then to the top of the body. All of it is reflecting these sacred geometries, and in particular this golden ratio.
Think about Michelangelo. He thought, okay, let's do that in 3D. Let's do it in a sculpture. And if you've ever seen pictures of David, this thing is huge. It's not life-size. This is 20-foot tall, this thing. He made a sculpture where every iota of the measurement of that sculpture was the perfect divine proportions of what a human body would look like. It was perfect.
The golden ratio is an irrational number, meaning that its terms go on endlessly after the decimal point, without repeating.
Those mathematical constants are very special because they're irrational values that have infinite tails beyond their decimal extension. I think of mathematics as like a language from the context that the numbers are words, the mathematical constants are verbs of action. Just like when we append to a noun an ing, it makes it an incomplete action. It continues on and is continuing on forever. So we could take a word like I text you or I'm texting you. I turn that noun, which is text, into a verb through that method. We do the same thing in the universal language of mathematics. We take a diameter and we circle the diameter, or circling the diameter, and turning that into a verb of action to make a circle.
Looking at the piano keyboard, we can see 2 black keys, followed by 3 black keys, intertwined with 8 white keys. The series 2, 3, 5, 8 is the beginning of the Fibonacci series. The ratios of these numbers, all gravitating toward the irrational and perfectly reciprocal 0.618 ratio of the golden section, or golden ratio. The spiraling nature of this phenomenon is also known as the Fibonacci sequence.
You see the golden ratio show up in the spiral galaxy and the way that spiral kind of grows and expands versus just a circular spiral. It's an ever expanding spiral. You see that same spiral in the shape of various shells from the sea, the spirals on the cone of a pine cone or a sunflower. You also see it in the way that leaves and branches emerge on the trees. You see them following that Fibonacci sequence often.
And all of it is according to the law that we see operating in music theory. It's all got to do with why music and chords and relations of vibration frequencies seem to be pleasing to us or have a powerful influence on us.
From the perspective of piano, we have 8 white keys. 8 is a Fibonacci number.
Prophet, did you get my email yesterday?
If we extend that all the way out, the 55th key becomes the note G. That's also a Fibonacci number. And the 89th would be the beginning of the next piano cycle because we have 88 keys on a piano keyboard.
The number 8 plays a role in another important aspect of creation. Buckminster Fuller called the cuboctahedron, with its 8 triangular faces and 6 square faces, the vector equilibrium. It's the only geometry in perfect equilibrium at the center. Physicist Nassim Haramein concluded that this must be the geometry of the vacuum. If they are stacked in unison with each other, we can create a perfect 64 tetrahedron.
The number 64 is a very curious number as it appears throughout history. It's a compound number. It's 8 times 8 equals 64. And 8 is the number of infinity. And we see this repeated over and over again. We see the number 8 reflected in the energies of our Kundalini. The ancient Egyptians believed that our brain essentially was a figure 8 with energy just continually moving throughout.
These fundamental oscillation of creation, as described in these ancient traditions, generated geometry from interference pattern. And many of these ancient cultures portrayed these geometry in their symbolism, and they described basically a triangulation of the space, commonly demonstrated, for instance, in the Hawaiian traditions as a stack of triangles, and in other traditions as star-like structures, triangles, and various geometries that were at the base of creation.
In Hebrew tradition, Merkaba literally translates to light, spirit, and body. The Merkaba symbol is a shape made of two intersecting tetrahedrons that spin in opposite directions, creating a three-dimensional energy field. The Tree of Life, or the Kabbalah, is considered a map of consciousness and a geometric symbol of the universe.
As we decode the Kabbalistic tree, again, we find the 64 tetrahedron, or the sphere packing of the 64 tetrahedron structure, and that relates, for instance, to other symbols that we find in other cultures. For instance, the flower of life.
Did you say you had got my email?
On the
I wasn't
Osirian
looking when you.
temple
By the time I
in
looked,
Egypt seemed to be
by the time I looked,
somehow
you had them,
imprinted on a
turn the screen off.
200-ton pillar in the middle of a very enigmatic temple.
Oh, okay.
This symbolism again matched this 64 tetrahedron grid, which matched the equations of space-time that produce a unification of physics.
From Africa and Europe to Asia, the 64 tetrahedron symbol has deep roots.
There's the I Ching, for instance, having 64 symbols made out of 6 sticks each. The yin yang, which seems to show the circulation of the space, or the dynamics of the space, the polarization of the vacuum.
Michael Hayes, the author of Right now, every one of us is in the process of thinking. What we may not realize is that this very process affects our reality.
One of the fundamental principles in ancient indigenous spiritual traditions is the understanding that what we think and what we feel influences the physical world around us.
American inventor Henry Ford famously said, "Whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right." In other words, your beliefs are frequencies mirrored in the world around you.
It's our thoughts, feelings, emotions, and even our beliefs have physical representations in the world around us.
Well, thoughts really direct our reality, both from how we perceive and the things we make out of our reality and what's happening in our environment, and they can affect what we manifest out of the quantum field into our physical reality.
When I was growing up, my father used to always tell me, "There's no such word as can't."
Every time we think, every thought that we create in our head actually leaves our head as a wave of light. We know this because we can put a cap on someone's head with electrodes on it to pick up those waves of light and send them to a computer so we can analyze the brain. When you think about something, that information goes out eternally into space-time as a wave.
From a physics perspective, all possibilities exist as potentials in the field, which is in constant motion in the quantum realm, and each of us has the ability to visualize and perhaps create these potentials. Expanded consciousness is the state of being awake and aware within this field.
Now, as a scientist in the modern world, when I began to hear this, it didn't make sense because my conditioning was that we're separate from our world, that we have little influence over the body within us, let alone the world around us. But as the implications of quantum physics became widely known and more accessible, it became apparent how this relationship exists.
If you're a distant civilization, you can pick up that radio frequency and you can actually decode it. So we know that thinking is important because it directly affects everything around us. Other people, other things, believe it or not, can quantum entangle with those waves of light and download the information that you were thinking.
Japanese researcher Masaru Emoto studied how thoughts affect our physical world. He experimented with 3 beakers of rice and water. Every day for a month, he said thankful words to the first beaker. For the second one, he spoke hateful phrases to the rice, such as, "You're an idiot." He completely ignored the third beaker. After 30 days, the first beaker of rice gave off a pleasant scent and began to ferment. The rice in the second beaker turned black, and the rice in the third beaker started to rot.
The worst rice samples is the one that was ignored. The same can be said in our daily lives when dealing with children. Ignoring children is the worst thing we can do, even if we have to scold them occasionally. Communication is very important.
Communication, thoughts, and behaviors have a frequency, which is why many cultures emphasize the importance of speaking, thinking, and acting with integrity.
And it's all about the words, the vibration, then the meaning that we give to those words, the vibration that we assign to those words. And this begins to help us to understand the true power of language in our lives.
You did such a great job at this.
Our thoughts could create static within the field. They could create, interferences that get in the way of the things we're actually trying to manifest. We have all this subconscious thought that's also going on below the surface, and that creates a lot of ripples and static and unnecessary waves upon the field.
This begins to help us to understand how the power of a thought can influence the way that neurons connect, the way that entire neural networks connect, and our ability through those neural networks to communicate not only within us, but to the world around us.
Our thoughts constantly affect the field, but what in the field influences our thoughts and consciousness? And what role does the brain play?
When we observe the human brain, there's a few things that can be deceiving. One is that we think of it as the seat of consciousness. We think of it as this place where somehow consciousness is manufactured. I don't think that is accurate. You can think of the brain as like part of the antenna that the body is actually tapping into a field of information. Just like a radio set doesn't have the band in it. It doesn't have the announcer in it. It doesn't have all the activities that you're hearing, the football game. Touchdown! It actually is just tapping into a field of information, electromagnetic waves that are being received by the antenna of the radio. You interpret what's coming in and you send it back through the nature of your protons and the Planck field into the universe.
The universe emits a huge spectrum of frequencies that can tune our consciousness in a variety of ways.
When we think about how sound affects our consciousness, we have the ability through chanting, through meditation, through song, to amplify our thoughts to a greater degree than perhaps most realize. And in amplifying our thoughts, we're having a direct effect on not only our own consciousness, but the consciousness of everyone that we come into contact with.
It was found that when we use music, it tremendously increases our mental abilities. So music is not just for relaxation. It's not just for fun, but it's much more than that. With music, we can much easier transform to higher states of consciousness.
You play a national anthem and people are ready to march into battle and lay down their lives. So music affects us dramatically. It's almost like we're in our culture, we're programmed by our music. Just imagine if we can actually apply this in a way that is directed at navigating or directing our culture into a higher frequency or vibration. That's where we're at right now.
Music in general, listening or playing, is one of the few things that can light up the whole brain simultaneously, as seen on
Hey lady, let me tell you why I can't live my life without you, oh, baby. Every time I see you walking by, I get a creep. You don't understand. I must make you understand. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I do, yeah, yeah. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. Wanna be your man. Better not pass me by. 'Cause if you do, you'll do a good thing. Oh, baby. 'Cause what I've got to say, sealed with a kiss and the wedding ring. Wedding ring. My mind is blind at times. I can't see anyone but you. Those other girls don't matter, no. They can't spoil my feel. I must make you understand. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I do, yeah, yeah. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. Wanna be your man. But you never say what I feel. Just doing it. Oh, I'm trying to tell you how I feel. But I get mixed up, so mixed up. My mind is blind at times. I can't see anyone but you. Those other girls don't matter, no. They can't spoil my feel. I must make you understand. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I do, yeah, yeah. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. I wanna be your man. Wanna be your man. I 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 wanna be your man.
All right, Prophet. I want to hear a little music now. I'll be back at the while. I'm going to stop this stream and start another one. Ray, it's time to